I'm 98 years old, and if you think getting this far simply means surviving time, you're looking at it the wrong way. Because what I've seen most throughout my life wasn't people dying. It was people being forgotten while they were still alive. And most of them believed they were doing everything right. My name is Mildred, and there's something I've never said quite like this before. I'm not in a nursing home, not because I was lucky, and not because someone took better care of me than others, but because at some point in my life, I made a choice that almost no one realizes they're making until it's too late. And no, it has nothing to do with money or perfect health or having children nearby. It's something much quieter and far more dangerous. Stay with me, because what kept me here might be exactly what's missing in your life today. There's something no one tells you about aging. People think what leads someone to a nursing home is age, or declining health, or the absence of family. But after nearly a century of watching entire lives unfold, I can tell you clearly, that's not what determines how someone ends up. What causes a person to lose their autonomy begins much earlier, in small, almost invisible choices. It starts when you give up making decisions for yourself just to avoid conflict. When you get used to living based on what others expect from you. When little by little you stop being at the center of your own life. And it doesn't seem dangerous at first. On the contrary, it looks like maturity. It looks like kindness. It looks like responsibility. I believed that for many years too. I thought being easy to deal with, being someone who didn't cause trouble, someone who always adapted, was the right path. But there is a silent price to all of this. Because every time you silence yourself to keep the peace, you are teaching the world how to live without considering you. And over time, this stops being a choice and becomes the way everyone around you learns to see you. Let me show you how this began in my life and why, by the time I realized it, I was already much deeper in it than I ever imagined. I must have been around 42 when I started to feel that something was out of place, but at the time I couldn't explain what it was. My routine was full, organized, predictable. I took care of the house, met everyone's needs, and was always available. If someone needed something, I found a way. If a problem came up, I solved it. And from the outside, it looked like I had a stable life, built on responsibility and dedication. I remember one specific night, sitting at the table after everyone had gone to bed, looking at the tidy kitchen, everything in order, and still feeling a kind of emptiness that was hard to ignore.
It wasn't sadness, it wasn't physical exhaustion, it was something quieter, as if I were living a life that was correct, but didn't fully belong to me.
And the strangest part was realizing that no one around me seemed to notice, not even me. I didn't want to admit it. Over time, that feeling became more frequent, but I learned to push it down. There was always something more urgent, someone who needed me, some responsibility that felt more important than stopping to understand what I was feeling. I told myself it was just a phase, that everyone felt this way at some point, that it was part of adulthood to put others first. And that's how, without realizing it, I began to drift away from myself. It wasn't a conscious decision. It didn't happen overnight. It was an accumulation of small concessions, swallowed silences, postponed choices. Every time I ignored what I wanted, I reinforced the idea that it didn't matter that much. And little by little, that shaped the way I lived. That's when something started to change, not on the outside, but within me. Because even without fully understanding it, a part of me began to realize that if I kept living that way, I wouldn't just lose moments, I would lose myself along the way. For a long time, I believed I was doing the right thing, that giving myself up was part of love, of maturity, of building a stable life. I told myself it was fine, that I didn't need much, that my happiness was in seeing others well. And in a way, it even felt true, because it was more comfortable to believe that than to face what was really behind it. But the truth started to show up in the small details I kept avoiding, in the way my opinions were no longer asked, in decisions being made without including me. In the moments I realized my presence was useful, but not essential, and that didn't happen overnight. It was the result of years of putting myself second without noticing how much I was fading. That's when I understood something that changed everything. No one needs to push you out of your own life when you've already done that yourself. It wasn't time, it wasn't other people, it was me who little by little taught the world it could move on without considering me. And when you reach that point, going back isn't simple, because people have already gotten used to a version of you that doesn't take up space. And in that moment, for the first time, I felt real fear. Not the fear of losing something, but the fear of never having truly lived. Of reaching the end as just a silent presence in other people's lives, someone who was there but never really existed for herself. That's when I realized that if I didn't change, my future was already being decided right there. And it wouldn't be age that would lead me to a nursing home. It would be the way I had been living long before growing old. The change didn't happen all at once, and I need to be honest with you about that. There isn't a magical moment where everything suddenly falls into place. What actually exists are small decisions, repeated every day, that begin to rebuild something that was forgotten for a long time. And the first thing I had to learn was how to listen to myself again, even when at first it felt strange, almost wrong. I started with simple things, saying no when something didn't make sense to me, even if it caused discomfort. Expressing an opinion without trying to soften it too much, without apologizing for existing, and most importantly, stopping the automatic assumption that other people's needs always came before mine. That didn't make me a bad person. It made me someone present in my own life. Then I realized I needed to reclaim something I had lost without noticing, the right to choose, choosing how I wanted to live my days, what I accepted, what I no longer accepted. Because when you spend years just reacting to what others expect, you forget that you still have the power to decide. And without realizing it, you slowly hand that control away for good. But maybe the hardest part was sustaining those changes when no one around me was used to this new version of me. Some people were surprised, others pulled away, and that hurts. But that's when I understood something no one talks about. When you start standing up for yourself, you don't lose people. You lose versions of relationships that only existed because you were erasing yourself. And in the end, all of this brought me back to a place I barely remembered. A place where I existed with clarity, with presence, with choice. And that's what most people don't understand. Independence in old age doesn't start in the body. It starts in the way you learn to occupy your own life while you still have time. The problem is that most people never recognize this trap while there's still time to escape it, because it comes disguised as virtue, as responsibility, as love. You believe you're being a better person by avoiding conflict, by giving in, by adapting, but without realizing it, you're giving up the one thing that sustains your autonomy. Your own presence in the decisions of your life. And the cost of that doesn't show up immediately. It comes years later when you've already gotten used to not being a priority, not even to yourself.
When the people around you no longer ask for your opinion, no longer expect your input, no longer consider what you want.
And at that point, it's not that you don't have a voice, it's that no one is waiting to hear it anymore. I've seen this happen to people very close to me. People who spent their entire lives being good, being understanding, being easy. And in the end, they were set aside with the same naturalness with which they had always accepted everything. There was no explicit cruelty, no dramatic abandonment, just a quiet distancing, almost imperceptible until it became permanent. And that's how many people end up in places they never imagined. Not because they didn't have family, not because they lacked resources, but because over the years they stopped taking up space until they became easy to rearrange in other people's lives.
When you don't set boundaries, the world finds a place for you, and it's not always the place you would choose. The hardest part to accept is that when this happens, it no longer depends only on you to change it, because the pattern is already set. People have already learned to live without including you.
And rebuilding that at the end of life is much harder than protecting from the beginning what you should have never abandoned. If there's one thing these 98 years have taught me with clarity, it's that the end of life isn't defined by time alone, but by how you position yourself throughout it. It's not about luck, nor about having everything under control. It's about not disappearing inside your own story while you're still living it. Because in the end, everything comes back to one simple truth. Those who don't take up space in their own lives end up being placed anywhere in other people's lives. And this doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, through small choices repeated over the years until they become the pattern. I didn't avoid a nursing home just because of external circumstances. I avoided it because at some point I realized I needed to start existing clearly again before it was too late. And that completely changed the way people began to see me, and, most importantly, the way I began to see myself. So when you think about your future, don't think only about money, health, or security. Think about something deeper. Are you living in a way that keeps you present in your own life? Or are you slowly becoming someone easy to set aside? Today, at 98 years old, I can tell you with calm certainty, what kept me out of a nursing home wasn't luck. It was learning, while there was still time, not to disappear within my own life. Because the biggest mistake isn't growing old, it's spending decades living in a way that slowly erases you until almost no one notices when you're no longer truly there. You don't have to wait until you reach this point to understand that. Start paying attention to the small choices, the moments you stay silent, the times you put yourself last. That's where your future begins to be decided much earlier than you think. If this message made you reflect, there may still be time to do things differently. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to continue this conversation, subscribe to the channel. There's still time.